Welcome to today's Christmas celebration. And as you know, today is the celebration of the birthday of Jesus Christ, who is, as Ditya mentioned right at the very beginning, one of the masters, gurus of our path here amongst these great souls. And I'd like to begin today's discourse and discussion with this reading from the Bhagavad Gita. This is from the 4th chapter. Though I, a fully liberated soul, am the Lord of all creation, and am in my true self, and abiding ever in my cosmic nature, forever unborn, yet I, by my yoga maya, assume from time to time an outward form. O Bharata, whenever virtue declines, any dharma or vice is in the ascendant, I incarnate myself on earth as an avatar, appearing from age to age in visible form. I come to destroy evil and to reestablish dharma. This morning, we had a very lovely brunch at the retreat. Many people came. We had a nice morning meditation, and we had a gift exchange, and sang some songs. And it was a nice, very nice social occasion, and with a deep spiritual undertone to it. And as is traditional on those Sunday brunches on Christmas Day, I was also asked to say a few words about Christmas and about Christ, and particularly, of course, today what I wanted to speak about this morning is Christ's role in Master's mission. And I don't wish to repeat myself this afternoon, but I want to mention that the life of Christ and his appearance as an avatar was very significant in the life of Paramahansa Yogananda, and it was the impetus for his mission in the world. We read in the autobiography of a yogi that Jesus appeared to Babaji and asked Babaji, requested him to send an emissary to the West to revive what he called the original teachings that had fallen into neglect of God communion, direct experience. And good works is fine, ritual is fine, outward form is fine, but without that nectar of God communion, it's like there's something absent. The heart of spirituality is missing. And so Babaji replied that he would send someone to the West at Jesus' request, and that some years later he met Swami Sri Yukteswar and told him that in future years he would send to him a student for training to be sent as an emissary to the West. And ultimately we know that emissary, that student, was our Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, that was sent. When I read that in the autobiography of a yogi, it had a very profound effect upon me, because I grew up in a tradition of no religion, really. I was not brought up in a religious family, good family, but not religious. And I read that, and it gave me a very different perspective. I was very respectful of Eastern tradition, but I had, might seem strange being a Westerner, but I had less regard for religion and spirituality in the West. And it made me look again at the role that Christ had played historically, but more than historically, also spiritually, in the large spiritual scheme of this life. And I think the impact was greater because I realized if what Master was saying in the autobiography was true, that there was a guiding force behind the seeming random unfoldment of events. Doesn't it seem like history is just moving in one direction or another direction? The thought that there might be guiding forces behind what's taking place in history was a totally new concept to me, and the possibility that that might be the case. My worldview went through a very significant shift, and I began to see the world in a very different way, that perhaps this world is not chaotic as it seems. Perhaps there are forces behind what's going on outwardly, and perhaps they're benevolent. They're benevolent. And to me, that was a very revelationary thought, a comforting thought, because we read in the autobiography, if Master's words are held to be true, that he said that Jesus Christ and Mahavatar Babaji are working together to guide the spiritual unfoldment in this age, of the world in this age. Now, I thought about that. Could that be true? Me, one small soul, I don't know if it's true, but I felt it to be true, and I have accepted it to be true, that there is a guiding force. Now, if that is true, obviously, Jesus Christ was a great avatar. And this is, of course, what Paramahansa Yogananda said. He was a great avatar, and it's important to understand what is meant by that word avatar when Master used it. He said an avatar is a soul who is completely free, paramukta, completely free. There's no karma remains. And that soul, through divine will, no particular karma of its own, incarnates. And so obviously, because there is no particular individual karma for that soul to incarnate, it comes usually for a very special person. Now you would say always, it comes for divine purpose. Sometimes those purposes seemingly are small, but sometimes they're also large missions, and often they come again and again. And such as I think been the case of our masters in this line. They've come again and again, and we know from what Master said in his own past incarnations, they've come again and again, sometimes playing major roles historically, and sometimes lesser roles historically. But they come with a mission, a purpose, and that purpose is to elevate souls, perhaps immediately in that lifetime, perhaps to set the stage for something to take place in the future. When Jesus came in his time, the religion in his age, the Jewish tradition, had fallen into a time of formality, a worship, you might say, of scripture and form and ritual and outward performance according to certain rules. And you see this happens many times in various religions. Religion tends to start out very inspired, often by the impetus of a divine avatar itself. And it's said, Master said, that Judaism, which traces its history far back, but one of the great masters of Judaism was Moses, that inspired, you can see if you read the Bible, he inspired the Old Testament, and much that is written there came through his tradition. And I imagine in his time it was a very inspired tradition, but as time goes by, and this happens, I could almost say it's destined to happen in all traditions, that form begins to take the place of spirit. And so it was in that tradition by the time Jesus had come incarnated. And his message is to go beyond the form, go beyond the rules, go beyond the rituals, and worship God in spirit. And you see this demonstrated again and again and again in the stories of the New Testament, of him arguing with the priests and the Pharisees of form and rules and outward dogma according to the Spirit. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath, and so forth. These types of stories are again and again. And he came, and unfortunately, many of the people had the notion, which I think some people in all ages have, that an avatar comes with an great outward mission as well. And oftentimes that can be true. And of course, people thought Jesus came with, as the Messiah, with that outward mission to bring a new kingdom of David, you might say, to the Holy Land at that time. But that wasn't what his mission was. It was to uplift souls, to reveal that inner light, and to reawaken that divine quest, for divine God communion within souls. And he came at that time to uplift, and began, of course, we look back historically, he began a great movement that was inspired in the many early centuries of that religion's history of deep spiritual quest, of people seeking God deep in the soul. But as time goes by, and of course that was in a darker age than we do now perhaps, but it's inevitable. As time goes by, things begin to ossify. And again, by the time, in Master's time, in our time, when Master came, Jesus had appeared to Babaji and said, yes, they've forgotten those original inspiration, and that something new had to come again. Jesus Christ was a great avatar, but so were all of the masters of our path. They were all avatars. I think Swamiji had asked Master Yogananda once, sir, are you an avatar? And he didn't answer directly. He said, it would take such a one to do a work such as this. Now, I think that was a yes. I think it was a yes, but he wouldn't identify. You think, I. You know, that wasn't, he wouldn't say I. But he said it would take such a one. And he came, again, to revive something. And you see this in the lives of avatars. They often come with a great mission, a mission that transcends their lifetime. It said that a great soul, Jivan Mukta, a person who has attained Nirvikalpa Samadhi, a great saint, they have the power. They have the power to liberate other souls. But it's only a limited number. But when an avatar comes, they have the power to liberate and affect the freedom of a countless number of other souls, whether in the body or beyond the body. And still, even today, 2,000 years later, Christ is inspiring in his devotees, those who worship indirectly, liberation and sainthood in those of devout nature. So this is the tradition. Now, an avatar, besides becoming their great mission perhaps that they have, their purpose is to uplift souls, not necessarily outwardly, but you can think of them too as a light shining in the darkness. And this image is often used when we speak of the great saints. You see it in the image of Christ and his birth, and the star and the light, and the awakening of the light. We see this image repeated many times. And you see it in other traditions as well, this awakening of light. And of course, that awakening of light is there a truth in and of itself, but as we know also that it's symbolic of that awakening of that light within us. But we see the avatar, we see the great masters as a light, and we recognize it. Those who are in tune with that light recognize it. And I think those of us who have, perhaps we've read the autobiography of a yogi and something touched us. It touched us, and it was that light that touched us. We were touched by it, and we recognized the light. And why is it that we recognize the light? It's because that light that we recognize outside of ourselves, in the masters, is the very same light that is inside of us. We recognize it. We see it. We know it. That is who I am. I am that. Tattvam asi. I am that. That I am. And we recognize it. And because we recognize it, we're drawn to it. It's magnetic. It pulls us toward it. And to the degree that we can, as devotees, keep that light aflame within ourselves, keep that light alive, we'll find that the pull of that divine light, you could say the Christ light, the Pratashta, that Krishna light, is shining upon all of us. And to the degree that we can open ourselves, recognize that, and keep the reflection of that light alive within ourselves, we are naturally, we don't have to work for it. It naturally will pull us because it's who we are. And you could say that our job as the devotees is to keep that flame, that light alive, to keep removing the veils. And of course, when we meditate, when we practice our techniques or Kriya Yoga, this is a direct way